It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that. If a year has a feel, this year 2026 feels the most nebulous and disorganized that I've had in my professional career. And without diving too far into root cause and the reasons why, I think everyone here who is paying attention to the world knows that we are dealing with politics, we're dealing with economic uncertainty, we're dealing with all sorts of things that are happening at once for a multitude of reasons. Never mind the disruption around AI in the workplace and layoffs and all those kind of things we've been hearing about in the news. Companies, small and large, don't know what to invest in. They don't know what to strategize about. They don't know where to put their energy and their dollars.
All right, Cale, here we are, episode 1, Operations Playbook.
Yes.
Folks, welcome to the latest pod. If you know me, I'm a podcaster, enthusiast, hobbyist, all around podcast junkie. Is that okay to say? But I do love podcasting because it helps get thoughts and ideas and wisdom, shared experiences out there. And it's just a fun time to be able to chat with folks. And Cale, you and I have been friends for a long time. I'm excited to launch this podcast with the two of us. I think we'll have some guests on here in. This is for us to chat biz ops and not just operations, but project management too. Two very separate things. It's early in the year. We got through the year of January. Now the rest of the year can begin. And we want to kind of give people a framework to approach their business structure so that they can have clarity over chaos. What are your thoughts on all that?
I think everything you said, I agree with. You are a serial podcaster. I'm a serial podcaster. All that autodidacting thing that we both do is really kind of taking shape here. When you and I talked about this a couple of days ago, what I was also struck by was it's January. And so the fiscal year is kicking off. So we've got a situation where some organizations are asking themselves, hey, what is our strategy for the year? And it may be a little late for that, but we've got that strategy issue on one side, and we've got a situation on the other where maybe they've got some kind of a hangover or a carryover of some degree from the previous fiscal year that they're dealing with. And so they've got some kind of a scaling problem or a growth problem, or just the operations are not as smooth as they would like coming into a brand new year. So I think that the ground is fertile with that phrase biz ops. There is so much territory to cover. I think it would be fascinating to see where we take it. And I would love to get some inputs from the folks who to listen in, to have them guide us and tell us where they really are experiencing a pain or a need or a particular bit of guidance or experience in their own, business operation situation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I wanted this to be a conversation like any podcast that we can generate beyond the bounds of this recorded episode. And you're touching on that preparedness. It's cliche. What is the phrase, the cliche phrase? If you don't have a plan, then you're planning to fail. They attribute it to
Exactly.
Ben Franklin. I don't know that he actually said it. However, the sentiment stands. And at the same time, something that I like to reconcile is an understanding that you have to be flexible at the same time, agile, little a, lowercase a, agile, but you have to be flexible because there are going to be things that are outside of your control and you can't control the outcome. You can influence an outcome. However, the inputs are what you have in your control. And so we can plan to a certain degree, and I believe we should plan. And at the same time, we need to have room for growth and flexibility and engaging in new ideas, innovation, surely. And we can't know what the future holds. So that's where and why we need to be flexible. And January, I don't know how everybody else is feeling, how you're even feeling, but I think that we all kind of slogged through January. And I've heard a lot of people that don't have plans in place or haven't even gotten to actual strategic planning.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that. If a year has a feel, this year 2026 feels the most nebulous and disorganized that I've had in my professional career. And without diving too far into root cause and the reasons why, I think everyone here who is paying attention to the world knows that we are dealing with politics, we're dealing with economic uncertainty, we're dealing with all sorts of things that are happening at once for a multitude of reasons. Never mind the disruption around AI in the workplace and layoffs and all those kind of things we've been hearing about in the news. Companies, small and large, don't know what to invest in. They don't know what to strategize about. They don't know where to put their energy and their dollars because they don't know what's going to happen next week, right? They don't know if they should hire or should they hold back. And that's every year. Usually by January, though, parenthetically, we know who we're going to have hired because we've got our budgets nailed down. Like you said, if for no other reason, we can work against two of our five quote objectives for the year while the other three are still being baked.
Yeah.
This year, we don't even have, I was carrying this forward. We don't even have two objectives in some cases,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Even in a good year, going back to my enterprise experience, we would begin fiscal planning for the upcoming year, usually around August, right?
Mm.
As we're working through Q3 and planning for Q4, we're also beginning to think about what is the next fiscal year going to look like. And so by now, we would have had a plan in place and we would be working that plan, whether it's a good plan or a bad plan, we'd be working that plan by now. This time, folks are stuck. Folks are they don't know what to plan, right? And
Man,
so
that's exactly it, Cale.
yeah,
They don't know what to plan. Well,
no,
you touched on I've done some research and I see a lot of content around burnout, and you touched on that. People are tired, whether it's burnout from politics, whatever's happening culturally around us, even in their own neighborhoods, maybe their workspaces. I believe it is one report I have it here actually. Around two-thirds of US workers report some level of burnout last year, and rates are 80% for many under 35. And that's just crazy to me. And the reason for it are long hours and heavy workloads and that kind of poor work-life balance boundary issue that a lot of folks are struggling with. And then they're feeling, this relates to my other podcast, Bad Bosses, Great Leaders, but those poor leadership, those toxic leadership situations are causing a lot of that stress. And so to me, it's just and all of it compounding to create greater unnecessary chaos. I think it's one thing to, you're starting something new, maybe you're a startup, maybe you're in a growth period and it's going to be a little bit messy and you need to roll up your sleeves and clear away that chaos. It's another thing to be creating it inadvertently or directly aware
right.
that you're creating chaos and we know better, so we should do better. I wonder, right? Like, and I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. But when I look at what people are struggling with, and the kind of mental health strain that they're feeling from their work environments, from the overload of capacity and the underwhelming amount of support, it just to me it does not put one in a place for great strategic planning to even begin.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things I thought was as you were saying, you would dig through, roll up your sleeves and dig through the chaos. And what we're finding right now is there's just more chaos. Right now, it seems to be chaos all the way down, right? And where that then took my mind was as a person who has built, a brand and part of a career on helping others get around barriers and metaphorically wiping the dirt off and getting back up off the ground and going again. I'm running out of ideas at the moment to deal with just the sheer amount of chaos coming from all quarters. It used to be that if I would be coaching or mentoring someone, they were dealing with maybe up to three directions where chaos was coming at them instead of nine or whatever the geometry would be. Some people have six, seven places or directions where chaos is coming at them. I couldn't even begin to tell that person where to start, which one to prioritize, right? Other
Yeah.
than to borrow from folks who study this more than I do, maybe that's when they go to that self-care place and they say, okay, you know what, I need to go back to I need to go back to first principles in this case, and that first principle is me. I've got to breathe. I've got to think. I've got to allow myself a chance to grieve about the situation, whatever, whatever your particular coping mechanism is, touch grass, as they say these days. They probably have to go back to the beginning, which is themselves, and then they can decide how they approach this chaos orchestra that we find ourselves in. You mentioned too, getting it sort of out of the personal back into, say, the corporate or the enterprise. You touched on something that I think we as people in organizations will often forget. We as leaders are people, and we know that. Sometimes the folks that we lead don't remember that or don't know that. And we can often forget that the folks in the C-suites and the senior leaders and all those, they are human too. So they're dealing with whatever they're dealing with, plus waiting for you and me. Where is our strategy cascade?
Right.
How do I lead my team? How do I lead my department? How do I lead my organization without strategy from on high? Where is it? And goes back to, they may not have one yet because
Yeah.
they're still dealing with and waiting for the board to tell them what the strategy is going to be, and they've got their own issues. It's not just the golf clubs don't fit in the trunk. They've got actual issues too. So it's
Yeah.
tough. It's tough to give folks that grace because you're like, oh, come on, you are higher in authority than me, higher paid than me. You went to Wharton and I went to a state school. Surely you know what to do. No,
No.
not
They
not even close to, not even close to
we have to
always.
Yeah, right. Well, we have to
Yeah,
give people grace and the benefit of the doubt, and yours is a good reminder that, we're all human and we're all gonna make mistakes too, and it kinda brings me to my segue because I've got a bunch of questions for you, Cale.
yeah,
When it comes to how do you plan, what are you planning, OKRs, all that great stuff, but the segue being that we want to be able to help people. Our thoughts or opinions are our own and based on our experience and learning, and we want to use that to be able to help people who might be in these positions where they're feeling that burnout, you're feeling stuck. Maybe you're that leader who doesn't have the clear direction that you need, or maybe you are left without clear direction from your leadership. And so hopefully for everybody listening, this can be that guide for you and some of our playbooks, if you will, for how we approach these things. And you and I met in an agile course. So, and you've been working with strategy a lot longer than I have. I've seen my fair share over the almost scary to say, like over 16 years worth of strategic planning sessions and being involved and being the recipient of them. But I want to talk to you what it means from an operational point of view, but also project management as well. So if we're to look at the year, you mentioned, just to kind of lead us in, but you mentioned that planning really needs to start in August the year before, thereabouts,
yeah,
right? If
absolutely.
if I'm a company and I didn't do that, is it too late? Because it feels too late, February is here, we're already in the year. What do I do if I don't have a plan?
Yeah, it's how do I say this? It's never too late. I could never say with a straight face to that person that it's ever too late. At that point, what they have to do, what we have to do in a situation like that, and we've all been there to one degree or the other. You have to go back to priority and you have to say to yourself, okay, I've either got half a plan, a third of a plan, or a tenth of a plan. I've got something. And is the piece of the plan is the piece of the plan I have, is it the number one priority for my enterprise? And was I lucky enough that that's where the planning started and I got that piece at least? And I got that one objective, right? Let's say you find yourself in that happiest of places where you have that one objective and it happens to be the number one for either your department or higher. Well, that's the one you begin to implement, and that's the one that you operate on, and that's the one that you go from plan to execution with. And I know that sounds like a very glib answer, but that is truly what you have to do. You can't sit and wait for the other three or four objectives to come to your team and then do your work. You've got a piece of work staring you in the face. Get going, begin implementing. While you've got your team spinning up and working on that objective, I think the other thing that you can do, and I'm speaking strictly just from what I've done in the past and what I will do in the future as well if I find myself in that situation. I want to use it as an opportunity to fill in some deltas of my own. If I'm sitting in a leadership perspective, if I'm a director, I'm a senior director, I'm in a fairly powerful position in my organization. I'm in a place where I can make decisions and I have influence, and I'm a place where I'm closer to where the decisions are made, the cascade to us, and I've got a broader scope of influence for the organization around me and quote below me. If I had a gulf up above me one level or two, this is my opportunity to say, you know what, dear leader, here's what we should do. Going back to that part about grace, where the folks above us, they don't always have the answers. You are in a position where you can play that strategic advisor role. You just need this managerial courage to say, hey, I wouldn't be in this situation if I didn't have the skill set and the experience and the knowledge to be that strategic advisor and to say to your boss, hey, Susie, you know what? Objective two, this is my take on it. I've got my team working on objective one. You give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. I'm going to go work on objective two. And I think these are the broad strokes. And I think based on all the talk we had back as late as October, this is where we should go. And I think you just have to then you have to start building your own framework and your own foundation for getting that work done. I would rather be course corrected and have my hand slapped by the boss for going off course a bit and being entrepreneurial with my strategy than to say, well, I waited on you. It's April and you didn't give it to me.
Yeah.
That won't
Taking
work.
initiative.
Yeah. So yeah, hopefully that was a reasonably, reason.
Oh, yeah. I wanna back it up too because, part of knowing what you're reaching for comes down to, figuring out what your objectives even are, right? And I wonder if people struggle to pick objectives. How do you pick an objective? Let's say you are uh top of the pile, the CEO, owner, you're leading the company. How are you picking the objectives for the year ahead?
I wish there was like this really sort of sexy intellectual answer that you were doing the next Sistine Chapel. You and I both know that these objectives come from one of two things, a combination of one of two things, either revenue or cost reduction, right? You're either bringing money in or you're costing less, or you're doing some combination of the both of the two. And so the objectives, w- those themselves, those $2 levers are all about, they define the strategy, right? And then the objectives are how that strategy is implemented, and the KRs and KPIs are how we measure it at one time or the other in time on the timeline. It's a matter of just knowing, if you are, let's say, for example, you are again in that senior leadership or junior executive level, and you're not the strategist, right? You've got a strategist on your team, or it's a matrix organization where the strategist is a team or two over, but you've got a piece of that strategist for 3 or 4 months a year as you're putting these things together. You're touching base and you're talking with him or you're talking with her, and that strategist is the one who's going to be a very helpful voice in putting those objectives together, right? And they are the ones that had better know what the strategy is at the highest level above you to hit those revenue targets or those cost reduction, those cost out targets, if you will. So tap the shoulder of that professional whose job it is to do that. You're leading the team to implement and to remove barriers, but you're going to be leaning on those smart people to give you that core answer. If you find yourself in a situation where you're defining the strategy, we talked about it a second ago, grab that opportunity and do the best you can, but don't do that because you didn't ask and you didn't tap the people that you have available. You didn't use your resources. Don't make that mistake, right?
What are your thoughts on, and I think that's great, a great response. If I'm not in that leadership position and I'm a middle manager or running a team or a project and I'm not getting that direction, I don't know what our OKRs are. and I'm trying to be that proactive initiative taking role, the one that you were talking about earlier. Where do I make sure that I'm at least aligned with where I think we might be headed and how I can make the best choice without the ideal input of information?
Yeah. My answer to that is going to be the answer to that question is going to be if you just ask that question when you realize that you have a problem, it's already too late.
Mm,
You, in an ideal world, sitting where you are as in that leadership position, or let's say it's even something as simple or as scary as you're a senior manager or a team lead or someone in that department being led by a director who doesn't know what her strategy or she doesn't know what the cascade is. If you've gotten to again to that certain level of authority, to that certain level of experience in the organization, hopefully you would have had your finger on the pulse of the team for quite a while and you're listening and you're watching for trends and you're looking for levers to pull. If it gets to January 1st or February 3rd or the day after Groundhog Day or whatnot, and you are just now wondering, how am I going to do that? You're probably in trouble.
yeah.
Now you're scrambling. And so the answer to your question, how do I do that, is you do that 6 months ago, you do that a year ago. You're looking for, if you've been in the organization, let's say for say 3 years or so, you see trends emerge. You see repeated methodologies. You see mistakes made or unmade, right? You see the writing on the wall and you can begin to infer and predict how to navigate those waters if you're paying attention, right?
Yeah.
Again, if you get to today, you don't know it, you're scrambling at that point.
And you need to be comfortable asking, right?
You need to be
Otherwise,
comfortable asking. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Other
yeah.
otherwise, if you're not asking, "Hey, what are our objectives? How are we measuring progress?" Then you aren't probably you probably aren't going to have that pulse, but you're also probably not going to have a good collaborative relationship with the rest of the leaders on the team either. I would
No.
imagine part of it
And what
is
you've just des I'm sorry.
yeah. No, no, I just part of it sounds like having the confidence and the courage to start that conversation.
Yeah, and that managerial courage goes back to saying 2 things, 2 or 3 different elements of it, which is the first one is being able to say have the courage to say, "I don't know, but I'm going to find out," or, "Here's how I'm finding out." Or having the courage to ask your leaders to lead your leaders and say, "Hey, where is the input I need?" Or, "Do you need my help?" Or, "Hey, are you struggling with this like I am?" Being aware, having that emotional intelligence and knowing where the need is, even if it is your leader where she's got the need. That bit back there where you said, hey, if you don't have anyone to talk to or they don't know either, now we're talking organizational dysfunction. And it's not just one person is not going to rescue the department or the enterprise at that point. Heroics aren't going to save it at that point. Right.
Well, that's where we get the burnout, right? That could be why people were burnt out last year if you
Yeah.
are, yeah, trying to outperform dysfunction.
You and I've talked about that. If let's say, for example, you're leading a team of say 10 individuals, then they've got varying levels of ability and experience, and so you're either enabling them and turning them loose and waiting for them to bring back the result or the product, or you've got one who there's a bit of hand holding, or you've got one who you're like, "Oh, just get them away, I'll do it for you." Bad trap, don't do that. But you're in that situation all the time where you're juggling the needs of those 10 people, let's say, because you, as that one leader, have got that cape on your back and you're doing everything you can to keep the organization afloat, right? Those heroics will only get you so far. How about this? And you had a post about it, which I thought was really, really good. You can grow to a certain extent via heroics, but there will be a wall where growing is no longer possible. And you will absolutely be unable to scale via heroics,
Yeah.
right? You cannot multiply Rebecca times 3 and have 3 superheroes. It doesn't work. You could hire some assistants, you could hire some help and grow horizontally and bring your cost up at the same time, but you're not going to scale that way, right? So you've
Yeah.
got to get out of that firefight heroic mode. You've got to have a strategy. You've got to have the organization do the hard work far enough in advance that we don't get to January without a plan,
Yeah.
right? It goes back to first principles, it goes back to doing the work way up front. That's why we say start in August. There's a few years where we started this stuff back in July, and it's like, oh, come on, guys. No, no, no. Next thing you know, we'll be starting fiscal planning in April. We'll
Yeah.
just be doing 365 a year, 365 a day, a year planning. I forget what book it was I read, and if I can think of it later on, we can share it. One big brain, his answer to that sort of problem where the need to plan keeps backing up and backing up because we're planning 1 year at a time. He said, well, there's your problem. Don't plan 1 year at a time. If you're an organization of a certain size, if you're an enterprise, let's say you're a manufacturer or even you're even a services company, you can plan out 3 years. That first year, of course, is going to have a much stronger level of certainty than year two and year three. Year three is directional. Don't even think about doing anything more than a plan for a plan. If you want to nail some objectives out for year three, fine, but they're probably based in, they're jello objectives. Forget KRs. We wouldn't even know how to measure those yet. We wouldn't know what a key result is for these. But year two, you should have that cone of uncertainty. It should be a little narrower. And so he said, plan 3 years in advance. Give yourself a chance to not just always be running for office like a congressman up for reelection every 2 years. Just plan out far enough to take the pressure off, right?
Yeah. Otherwise, it feels like you're just restarting the business every year
Every
and
year.
get exhausting. And that's also going to lead to burnout amongst every level of the company. We talked about KRs, key results, KPIs are telling you what the current progress is, right? And we've got leading and lagging KPIs. It's a lot of data, and it can be hard to know where to look and what data to look at. And before you know it, it's all well and good to create a dashboard. I love making dashboards. I also want to make sure that I'm looking at the most important data that's going to show me the impact and where to put attention towards, because data, to me, it's the start. It's where you get the information you need to obtain greater insights and see patterns, and then know where to prioritize your time and your efforts. And it can still be very confusing. So, how do you guide people in choosing the right KRs? Which KPIs are we using? Where do you even begin with that? Because that can be really crazy. And most people are not in data analysis. So, they might not even know the difference between a KPI or a KR.
Yeah. Oh, and the answer to your question, the title escapes me, but the practical takeaways are taking a look at that objective and saying, okay, let's forget the boilerplate, fluffy strategic language. This objective has an end goal. This objective is an end goal. What is this objective? When we meet the objective, how will we know? Right? The objective has to be defined in such a way that there is a finite answer to how do we know when we've done it, right? And the example this book used to give would be, it would say an objective you see out there would be, we're going to increase, our throughput by 25%. That is a terrible objective. You don't know when that's done. Put a raw number on that, or put a number on that and say, our throughput needs to be, you know, uh, 50 gigaflops instead of 35. Now I've got something finite to measure. Did I hit the objective or not? Right? Did I make 50 or did I just get to 49? And so now your key results are those that help you measure along the way on a quarterly basis, by the way. If you're doing OKRs the way that you're supposed to, according to my experience in business school and all that, you're checking yourself against the objectives on a quarterly basis.
Yeah.
Every quarter you're saying, okay, are we on track? Are these key results trending to meeting that objective of 50 gigaflops of throughput, right? Or are we off track? And so it goes back again to doing the work and being smart enough to pay your future self by giving yourself a measurable finite objective.
And
And I
then,
and my experience is, to wrap that up, my experience is if you do that, the KRs are almost self-defining, because
mm,
all you're doing now is saying, what are my leading indicators that tell me that I'm on the right track? Like you said, to your point, or they may be lagging too. But the idea is that I've got indicators now. I've got milestones and roadmaps and guideposts that tell me I'm on track or I'm the right velocity or what have you. Yeah. Hopefully that's a useful answer for you.
Yeah, and I think we have to be careful not to fall into the trap of just trying to measure everything too, right? Because again, if you're overwhelming yourself with data, you're not really going to be able to know where to prioritize your time and attention. And that's where the planning is meant to help us. Otherwise, the whole company is going to be scattered, investing their time, which is a valuable resource, into areas that might not actually have a great impact and the value that you're looking to achieve. And so the KR, that's giving us that you're setting that desirable vision for the future, right? And you're measuring that vision. It will help you in guiding progress and the progress you've made from one point, one period of time to another. And you might have to readjust. Like, that's why we look at them quarterly, right? Because we have to be agile, flexible, and readjust. And then this is where I see people fall into the trap of just looking at KPIs. Oh, yes, Measure What Matters by John
Measure what
Doerr.
matters.
Yep.
I I I backed my way into the title. Measure what
Yeah.
matters. If you're listing out there, the to my mind the gold standard for how to get your head wrapped around OKRs and get out of the theory and just do it is this Measure What Matters by John Doerr. Period. It's not a very thick book, but it's like quote to my mind it's the Bible of OKRs, if you will.
Oh,
Um,
I love it. I'm glad you pulled that up
yeah,
because that is a
yeah,
must read for and
yeah.
not just if you're in ops, of course. Everybody. Uh, maybe I shouldn't make this a universal blanket statement, but operations is everybody. You just need specific people to lead it, right? But
That's it.
but everybody
Yeah.
has a part to play in the operations of a business. And so understanding these key components to developing strategy, to measuring progress is so helpful and important. And it will empower you as the individual, whatever your role might be. But yeah, I think that's a great book. It's a good reminder for all of us when you're overwhelmed with data, that there are so many different KPIs to choose from, and being able to explain the story behind the metrics, the data that you're looking at too, is equally important, so other people understand how you're measuring. It's not just simply looking at a dashboard and seeing what comes up and what comes down, right? And the math is not strictly linear either. But when it comes to the planning, I can see a lot of folks get overwhelmed with just pulling a bunch of KPIs and understanding what they're measuring, how they're measuring it, and forgetting to track key results that show your progress. So I think it's incredibly important to learn and very helpful. And there is a level of flexibility too, right? If I'm looking quarter to quarter, I might have to adjust for reality and
Yeah.
the
Market
external
forces and
conditions. Yeah, yeah.
external
Well, and
conditions.
what do you do if we think about a project, not necessarily business ops and the daily work, but projects. How do you shift a project and the measurement of progress when you're hit with external elements that are going to stall progress or change what you had idealized in the planning phase?
Mm. Man, the question you asked there is coming from two angles to my mind. It's coming from that classic project management, management angle of saying, if you've got a good PM at the helm, they've done the risk analysis, they've got a risk management plan in place, and they are, again, are astute enough to realize that they're going to have to worry about resource risk and scope and schedule and all that. And they're going to need to also factor in those external factors, right? Especially again in this environment we're dealing with right now in the world. If someone is not baking in those external factors as another facet, they're not doing their diligence, and they're missing probably the biggest vector that's going to come back and whack the program, right? And one of the things that you said that I think is key to sort of circle back to and not go unsaid is when it comes to how do we measure our success against the objective with these KRs? And there's that piece of it. And you said, remember, everyone has got a part to play. They've got a skin in the game. They've got contributions. One of the things that you'll see from the author of that book, from Measure What Matters, is John Doerr said, hey, sure, objectives come from the top. Key results better come from the team. Key results are how the team is telling the boss that they are going to hit the objective. They are the ones on the ground who know how to do it. They are the ones on the ground who can commit to doing it, and they're the ones on the ground who should commit. They're the ones who are accountable for delivering against that objective. So they're also the ones, by extension, who know how to hit it. Or they say, I'm sorry, boss, that objective is unattainable because. And during this planning phase that we were supposed to have been doing 4 or 5 months ago, you're having those candid conversations with your delivery team saying, is this objective tenable? And if not, why not? And what objective may be tenable? It's not always a binary pass fail. Sometimes it's this objective needs to be tweaked, or let's run this modified version back up, or the substitute back up the flagpole, if you will.
Yeah.
But it goes back to, again, saying, don't discount, and don't just throw the objective over the wall at your team and say, do it, or here's your KR to go with that objective. That's a recipe for suicide, a recipe
Absolutely.
for disaster, what have you.
Chaos.
Yeah. So the answer is both. The team has to give you the answer as the leader, Rebecca, whether it's the project manager who's asking the question on behalf of the team or it's the strategist. The team is the core. The men and women who do the work, Joe Bag of Donuts, as we might the old phrase, Jill Lunch Pail, they're the ones who tell you if you're going to pull it off or not.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
And oh man, we could really go down. We have to keep this intro episode kind of like short for everybody. Otherwise, we'll just cover all the episode topics. But our goal for this series is to bring some practical advice. So I feel like we've set the stage for everybody. We hear, I hear it, I see it. There's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of big question marks, little question marks all around is the terrain going to look like? And there's an element of agility that we need and flexibility. But if we can add structure to bring clarity to the chaos and allow people an opportunity to grow and to scale, then it's to be had. And we're going to be tackling a lot of these burning questions. Cale, what's your takeaway for everybody now that's practical and will give them some reassurance as we're in it, we're in the depths of it, we're already in the year.
Yeah. My it's going to sound canned and trite, but this is not new. There has been chaos of one level or the other for as long as there have been people. It just seems like right now that we're living through, and may be objectively, the most chaotic phase in recent memory. So be it. But you're not alone, and it's not new. So those are meant to be supportive and edifying thoughts. And the last one I'm going to leave is, to me, is the more actionable and less touchy feely version of how we could proceed. And you said it, structure, and I don't mean process for process's sake, or paperwork, or frameworks. Structure, order, right? Structure is the opposite of chaos. Okay, so if we are looking for a way to get out of chaos, we go to structure. We go back again. I hate to use this word again and again, but we go back to first principles. We go back to foundation. We say, okay, what is the structure? What is that? What is that? I think it was the top of a piano that in Titanic she was on. So there's
There
that
was
structure.
room for
She's
Leo. There was
right.
room.
Yeah, poor Leah. Yeah, she's on there's that structure. Hold on to that piano lid or whatnot in the middle of this. And we're going to build our podcast series off of that structure, right? Because that's the antidote. Because with the structure, you can use words like flexible and adaptable and agile, but you can't be flexible and adaptable and agile in chaos. There's nothing to anchor to.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
nothing to be agile about if you're swimming in muck. So we're going to put both parties on that piano lid, right? And
Yeah.
tear this metaphor completely apart. But yeah,
I
yeah,
I I believe that the structure can set you free to be flexible and agile, but that is a great visual. You need that anchor. You need it to begin with. and knowing that you can change and adapt over time. I'm excited for this. I want to hear what other folks want to hear and learn about and what will be most useful for them. In the meantime, we're going to keep our ear to the ground or eyes on the forums
Right.
for what we're seeing
Yeah.
people are struggling with. And with all that said, put together a really awesome operations playbook that folks can learn from and take advantage of, all for free because we want to give the most value. So, thank you all for listening. Thank you, Cale, for your expertise. Until the next time.